Unit 3 looks at the different classroom configurations or setups. Before we begin to look at the different ways that you can arrange your classroom, let's quickly recap what you need to keep in mind when you are designing your classroom. Firstly, your classroom should suit your teaching, whether it's teacher-centered or learner-centered. Secondly, how you plan on getting the information to the learners and the types of interactions that will occur. And lastly, your classroom design is dependent on the physical features, the size and shape of the classroom, and the number of learners that you have, and the distractions that present themselves daily to the learners. The first classroom configuration we're going to look at is a very traditional style called rows or columns. And this style is suited for a teacher-centered approach, where the learner does most of the talking and passing on the knowledge and the skills to the learners. Learners work more individually, and this setup is not suited for group work. This setup, however, is conducive for a large class that needs to have many desks and occupy as much space in the classroom as possible. Let's look at some of the advantages of this setup. Firstly, it encourages productivity, as learners spend more time on task because there are fewer distractions. Rows are effective for tests and presentations, as everyone is facing the front and you will have a good view as the teacher. There's less cheating in tests when learners are seated in rows or columns. And as the teacher, you can monitor and supervise all learners from the front of the classroom. Now, the disadvantages of having rows or columns is that it discourages discussions and debates, and as more individual learning style is usually adopted. The teacher is restricted to the front of the classroom, and therefore it is very difficult to walk around, to monitor, or to assist learners who are struggling at the back of the classroom. Learners tend to work by themselves in this type of arrangement, and this limits interactions amongst learners. And remember that children, like adults, are human beings and crave interaction with one another. And lastly, learners may become bored and lose focus if they are exposed to a teacher-based learning all the time. There needs to be more interaction and a more diverse way of teaching if you're going to adopt rows or columns in your classroom. The next shape we're going to look at is the U shape, also known as the horseshoe. This setup allows for both teacher-centered and learner-centered teaching. It promotes whole class and or large group discussions and is more suitable for small or medium-sized classes. There's a lot of unused space in the middle, so teachers with bigger classes will probably opt for more different classroom arrangement to use that space more effectively, or perhaps put more desks in the classroom. With the U shape, there are many pros. Firstly, learners are able to see the front of the classroom and no one is hiding behind anyone else. So this encourages participation. It'll make them feel more part of the class and more likely to participate and to contribute. Because the teacher can easily see each learner, all learners can see each other, they will be able to interact with the entire class. The teacher is easily able to spend one-on-one time with the learner or move around freely to help learners, and this helps to develop connections and foster or nurture relationships with your learners. And lastly, this arrangement is suited very well for presentations, as the presenter can see and connect with each learner in the classroom. Now, the downside to having a U-shaped setup in your classroom is that it is not suited for large classrooms, as we mentioned before, as space is not used very well. There's a lot of wasted space. This layout is suited for whole class discussions, so it does not support small group work. Because learners can see and interact with all the other learners in the class, it may be a bit more challenging to manage and control their behavior. And often shy or introverted learners become anxious with the setup, as they would prefer to either work individually or in pairs, and become very anxious or intimidated when having to present or contribute to a whole class discussion all the time. Arranging your desks in groups is another common classroom arrangement. This setup promotes a learner-centered approach, and the clusters of desks are perfectly suited for small group work. This arrangement usually suits most size classrooms. Now, the advantage of this setup is that there is more idea sharing. The learners who perhaps forgotten about in the back rows or the shy learners in the U-shape will feel more safe to share their ideas in small group work. The clusters of desks encourage teamwork amongst the learners and promotes interaction with one another as well with the teacher and other learners. Small groups promote problem solving and communication. The downside to this arrangement is that learners working in small groups are presented with many more distractions, and so learners spend less time on task compared to, let's say, learners who are working in rows or columns individually or in pairs. This arrangement may become challenging for teachers to control the behavior as it promotes more interactions. Lastly, when learners are working in groups, it is difficult to assess who does not understand when the weaker learners could possibly be carried by the more stronger learners in the group. If none of the classroom arrangements seem like they would suit your class, there are a few alternatives or combinations that you can explore. A popular choice is the stadium, as learners can work individually or small groups. It is teacher-centered, and it is suitable for all class sizes. All learners are able to see the front, and the passageways allow the learners and the teachers to be able to move freely amongst one another. Another popular option is the runway, and this is a learner-centered approach. And this style is similar to the U-shape as it promotes whole class discussions and debates and is more suited to small and medium-sized classes. The fusion is a popular choice as well. It is a combination of both rows and groups or clusters. It adopts a more learner-centered approach. All learners are able to see the front, and it is suitable for all class sizes. Now, the appeal of the fusion is that the teacher is able to freely move amongst the learners in the classroom. They can get to learners to give support and mini lessons, and they're also able to address distracted or disruptive learners in the classroom. The rows in the front of the class are available for learners who become easily distracted and perhaps need to work individually, while the groups allow for more interactive or collaborative style learning amongst the learners. So as you can see, there are many options that you can use in your classroom, and the different designs need to fit with you, your teaching style, and your learners. And just because you adopt one layout or design doesn't mean you can't change it next week, or you can't merge two together that suits you. So be creative and think out the box.